Hello and welcome to this podcast for anyone interested in applying for the Nine Dots Prize or just generally curious about writing non-fiction. I'm Jane Tinkler, Senior Prize Manager for the prize, and we hope that this podcast will inspire and guide your writing. As Einstein said, the important thing is to not stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. And at the core of the Nine Dots Prize are our questions, reflecting contemporary societal issues that writers then grapple with. So in this episode, to mark the 10th anniversary of the Nine Dots Prize, we want to focus on questions. What makes a good question? How do we identify them? Where does inspiration come from? And what might be some of the big societal questions that we have to ponder in the next 10 years? We're going to hear from two fantastic members of the Nine Dots Prize board who are going to share their thoughts and observations. It's lovely that you're able to join us today for our first episode of our Nine Dots Prize podcast.
With pleasure, and thank you very much for organizing the podcast.
And good morning from my side of the world. It's a pleasure to be with you. And of course, to our listeners.
My name is Riccardo Rebonato. I am Professor of Finance at EDHEC, which is one of the French Grande École Business School. My research topics are in asset pricing and the economics of climate change.
My name is Professor Jarpa Dawuni. I'm a full professor of political science at Howard University in Washington, D.C.
So to help me reflect on the insights of Professors Riccardo Rebonato and Jarpa Dawuni, and to share her own impressions, I'm joined in the studio today by another brilliant member of our Nine Dots Prize board. Linda, could I ask you to introduce yourself?
Of course. So I'm Linda Yueh. I'm an economics fellow at St. Edmund Hall at Oxford University and an adjunct professor at London Business School.
Brilliant. Thank you. Linda, today's podcast is about questions, how we approach them, where our inspiration comes from, and thinking about the really big questions that we might have to tackle. Now, for the past decade, the Nine Dots Prize has posed questions that have touched on a wide range of contemporary societal issues. Our questions have included things like, is data failing us? What does it mean to be young in an ageing world? And are digital technologies making politics impossible? If you're watching, you can see some of the resulting books from our questions in front of us here. Over the next 10 years, we'll inevitably see a rapidly changing global landscape, politically, socially, economically, that will build on some of the existing problems we have, but also raise some new ones. Each cycle, it's the job of our board members to look at the world and the questions that are arising within society to shape a question for the prize. So we asked our board members what they think might be some of the issues that we'll have to contend with over the next decade. Let's hear what they have to say.
Definitely, the environment is an important one. The environmental sustainability and how the world is shaping up in terms of how we are destroying or conserving environment, and that comes in different forms. We also know that technology is not going to slow down, so there are going to be different ways in which we can ask and answer questions to do with technology, not just AI, but technology in all forms, in medical technology, environmental technology, space technology, you name it. Another important area for me, once again, is questions around the rights of women, which is regressing in many parts of the world. So how do we safeguard the rights of women and the rights of children and other minoritized groups of people around the world? Whose voices do we hear, and why do we hear those voices, and for what purpose? And I think another important question I would like us to consider is the implications of political tensions on the rest of the world. So how can a decision by one country affect the rest of the world, and with what implications for our daily living?
If we look back 10 years back and what we thought were the most important questions 10 years and 9 years and 7 years and 5 years back, there has been a remarkable shift in emphasis, attention, and relevance. So I'm very, very reluctant to venture into future gazing. There are some things that very important, extremely important, but do not command the same type of urgency as others. For instance, I would put climate change, as I said, my research is in this area, is a super important topic, but at every crisis, immediately there are other priorities that can be very well justified at the moment, and many of these issues are interrelated. So if we think of the fraying of a democratic tissue, that cascades into lots of other things, because climate change decisions, responsible climate change decisions, can only be carried out in a strong democratic system which is not swayed by populists. Things are changing so quickly that 6 months ago it's a different world.
So, some topics that were mentioned there: AI and technology, climate change and sustainability, women's and children's rights, democracy and populism. These are huge themes. I mean, Linda, would you have also picked some of those themes? What do you think about the topics that have been mentioned there?
I think those are all things that I would have mentioned myself. I would probably emphasize perhaps two aspects or perhaps two additional dimensions. So the very first one is a lot of my work has been on economic history. So there are points in time when the economic consensus breaks down.
Right.
So when I say the economic consensus, it's actually broader than economics.
Yeah.
It is around social expectations, political expectations. So if I give you a couple of examples, perhaps that would illustrate why I think we're at such a point today. So if you think back to, for instance, the end of the Cold War, so this is the early 1990s, at that point, it seemed as if we had come to a consensus. In fact, there was a very famous book written at the time by Francis Fukuyama called The End of History.
Yeah, of course.
So it was a consensus that we were entering a liberal world, democracy, capitalism. But that consensus began to fray by the end of the 1990s. What you saw was a protest at the World Trade Organization and this feeling that globalization was not working, not just within country, because trade creates losers, but also between countries. So I think looking where we are today, I think there is discontent around not just the economic system, but also around some of the themes that the others have mentioned around populism, around immigration, around whether or not this market economy really does help people get on the housing ladder. Does it foster inequality? Is there enough opportunity? And so rebuilding that economic consensus, which really has frayed, especially I would say since the global financial crisis of around 2008, I think that is a thing that's going to be with us. And it's just much broader than economics. And so it is, I think, in these moments where the opportunity to really shape a battle of ideas comes from. So in other words, how do you reach a new consensus? Well, it is by asking the right questions. It's about proposing possibilities. It's about creating a public conversation and discourse. And that's actually where writing, reading, a discussion can really help, I think, society, come to a view as to what is the best system for the 21st century. So I think that, for me, is one of the reasons why the Non-Doubts Prize is so special, because we have the opportunity to begin to frame some of those conversations. And perhaps I'll just throw in one other theme, which I think might be coming up, which this actually is based on a quote by John Maynard Keynes, the great economist. In 1930, he said, "In 100 years' time, the economic problem will be solved, but then we'll have to face a real issue, which is how to live agreeably and well." Wellness, I think a lot of the quality of growth and quality of life, and this encompasses a range of things, including advances in medical technology, how it impacts people's well-being. All of that, I think, will be very intertwined with technology and other social developments. But I'll just conclude by saying one of the reasons I like learning from history is I think there are things you can take away to extrapolate. But I always bear in mind a quote attributed to the American writer Mark Twain, who said, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme."
Yeah. Yes.
So you draw your lessons carefully.
That's a great one. I mean, you've given us some really interesting extra themes to add to our long list there. But I'm also interested in, you've mentioned looking back into history, but Riccardo also mentioned be a future gazer. The board have a really tricky job to do in trying to think what topics might be relevant. Is that quite difficult? Or, to sort of look forward to something that might still be relevant when the book comes out in 2 years' time?
It is difficult. But I think some of the themes that we've all mentioned are probably structural trends.
Yeah.
So AI, technology, the nature of society, social changes, all of these things are probably fairly structurally embedded in how the world operates. So I think fashioning a question is always challenging, because how do you create a question that can really grab people's attention so that we can debate what the future looks like in 2 years' time when the book comes out and years after that. So when they get the book and they read it, it starts to, feel timely, relevant. And I think a lot of what I enjoy about the board is that I think we have crafted just some questions that I think will make a real contribution intellectually to our discussions. And so far, they haven't felt dated.
Well, that's good to know. Thank you so much. Now, for any writer seeking to answer a question, the quality of the question can be the difference between a flying or a floundering start. So we asked Riccardo and Jarpa what they think makes a good question. What do you think makes a good question?
A question to which I do not know the answer. And I think that this element of intellectual honesty, if you're asking a question, you should really be asking a question. You should be open and ready to be informed and surprised.
It's a question that is not a simple yes or no. So it has to be one that allows for different approaches to answering it. And it has to be a question that allows people to be innovative in terms of how they bring new skills and ideas to answering the questions.
So you've heard what Jarpa and Riccardo think. What do you think makes a good question?
Oh, I agree with what they've said. And I think I would probably just add one aspect, which is a lot of research, especially in economics, is something which is a stylized fact. So what do we mean by a stylized fact? It just means something which is, it looks like it's true. It looks representative, or it looks like it's true across history. So it's a stylized fact. But the research question finds something surprising. So it goes against conventional wisdom. So probably the best example I can think of are the popular books, Freakonomics, that series, which is interestingly co-written by an academic and a journalist. And there's a great example from that book, from a title from that. I think the first book is Why Do Drug Dealers Live with Their Mothers?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
So I think for me, some of the best questions are things which are just, it looks a little bit counterintuitive, which
Yeah.
makes you think. So I think in my own writing, in my book, The Great Economist, which was also a popular book, I phrased every chapter title as a question. Something like, is inequality inevitable?
Yeah.
So when people see the chapter title, they read it going, I thought it was, or I thought it wasn't, but these are the different takes on it, and this is what the evidence shows. So for me, it's always something which is, just slightly, just makes you stop and go, oh, I thought that, but perhaps I could be open to other interpretations, which is actually why I think the questions, I know I'm biased, but I think the questions of the 9 Dots Prize do that.
That's great. I mean, you've mentioned there sort of where people may be coming from in terms of their career, so a journalist or an academic. I mean, I think we're quite proud that the board is a diverse set of people and also from a number of different countries around the world. Do you see that as bringing a benefit, that diversity?
Oh, absolutely. Because I think when we talk about having a great discussion around a issue that will really resonate, it's incredible how many different perspectives from countries or from disciplines, and how that just makes the discussion richer and more robust. So to me, that's actually one of the reasons why I think the questions have really resonated, because it is really kind of, the phrase kicking the tires.
Yes.
You're kicking the tires from a whole range of perspectives. And sometimes when I'm sitting in the discussion, I'm just astounded by, the range of points that get raised, so that you do feel at the end of it almost a sense of satisfaction. Okay,
so
we've got there. But in that most positive way, because you've really thought through all these dimensions, which you really can't do unless you have a very diverse and inclusive board.
Yes. I think when I spoke to Jarpa, she really agrees with you on some of those points.
It's quite a diverse board, and that really helps us in terms of thinking about the questions, the different issues that we bring from different parts of the world and our identities. And so that really enriches the questions we come up with. And it's a wonderful time sitting with colleagues and trying to think through everybody's mind and what they're bringing to the table. So I really absolutely enjoy that part of the board and the work we do. In terms of the questions that we choose, it's also a very interesting game we play in a way where everybody has a question or two at hand, and then we put it out there and we try to figure out, well, who's going to be able to sway others to think like they are thinking about the question. And what amazes me most is sometimes we are all kind of going in one direction or almost in one direction, and somebody throws in a question or a thought about a question, and we go in the totally opposite direction.
Well, I mean, as that said, when we think of questions, our mind immediately goes to what the answers could be. So I was intrigued to know whether our board members were already trying to think about the potential answers they may see when they get the 9 Dots Prize entries. In our conversation, Riccardo highlighted that he feels it's often down to the nature of the question posed.
I can see 2 types of questions. One which is extremely narrow, and therefore you're really channeling the answers to be in one direction. The other one, at the opposite end of the spectrum, it's so vague that you may receive almost anything. So you want some structure, you want to be surprised to some extent by the good submissions of the good candidates, but not so much so that you are saying, oh no, that is not what I meant at all. Every choice we make about how the question is formulated slightly opens or slightly closes the door. And we are really trying to keep the door ajar.
So that's a nice way of thinking about it, the ajar door. But I mean, when we're thinking about questions, when you're sitting in the room, do you also try and think what the answers might be, or even how you might answer the questions that you're setting?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I love that metaphor of the ajar door, because that's a sense that you want a question that you want to go through it and see what others have thought. And so that means the question can't be black or white. It can't be a yes or no.
Yeah.
So it's by definition intriguing.
Yeah.
It's by definition something where I could answer it differently.
Yes.
But somebody from a different discipline would answer it differently.
Yeah.
And that's where you can really get some innovative submissions looking at the same question, but from a variety of, lenses. And I think those are the best questions, because then we have real choice.
I mean, thinking about your work, you've obviously worked across different fields and have different roles in those fields. I mean, how do you go about identifying the questions that are going to inspire you for your work?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I probably also end up centering on something that makes me curious. Like, I think I know the answer.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. So it's worth spending time on it because, as you know, research, writing a book, it's years of effort.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot about what would I enjoy researching? And that often guides what I end up spending my time writing. My problem is I enjoy the research part so much. I read a huge amount and I got to write my own part now.
Yeah, it's the trouble.
Yeah.
Oh, well, let's turn back to our board members and we ask them how they sort out questions in their lives.
In my professional life, I think with time, now that I've become a full professor and, I have 7 books under my belt and multiple chapters and articles, the questions just come from everyday occurrences and everyday conversations. In the early stages of my career, I would think about, it has to be a question that is scientifically provable and the variables have to be matching and my selection method has to match the data says so that I show that I am being very scientific. But right now, it's just the everyday things that happen, conversations, but also sometimes they come out of what I perceive as a problem or an issue.
Sensing the question that is of interest, that is the key element. I always try every year to have at least 1 or 2 papers in which I am trying to discover for myself something that I didn't know. And to come to this research with as few preconceptions as possible. I am working in economics of climate change. It's a tricky area because it's not a dry area. It's an area in which there is deep emotional involvement. And one is to keep the intellectual honesty to say, I don't want to find the answers that corroborate the position that I have already. If they do, great. But someone much cleverer than I am said that economic analysis can be used either as a light bulb or as a rock. As a light bulb is something that illuminates and gives you understanding in an area that you did not, where you couldn't see before. And a rock is something that you use to pound and reinforce your prejudices and says, I have. So perhaps I'm being over ambitious or over optimistic, or I'm self-flattering, but I try as much as possible and within pragmatism to use my research as a light bulb and not as a rock.
So was there anything there that chimed with you, Linda, from Jarpa and Riccardo's views?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm chuckling a little bit because, in fact, there is a joke, which is, economist looks at something and says, so it works in practice, but does it work in theory?
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely, different, theoretical, not
Yes.
just economics, but different,
Yeah, that's
subjects
right.
have their theory, which is absolutely important. But I think for this kind of book, and for this kind of book prize, it is much more empirical. It's much
Yes.
more implied. It is much more accessible.
That's it.
And so I think that's probably why that analogy really does
Really
work
works.
because what you're trying to do is to, I think, just provoke some thinking. Oh, I hadn't actually thought about AI that way, or real estate, or legal systems,
Yes.
referring back to sort of last year's winners.
Yeah. Now, when we are starting to think about answering questions, it can seem like you're standing at the bottom of a very steep hill. As Professor of Political Science at Howard University, Jarpa shared some techniques that she's given to her students for how to approach a question. How do you then take that question and try and think about how you might try and answer it?
I sometimes also phrase a question in different formats just to help me think about the different angles with which at which I can address a question. But I like to think organically, and I like to do the good old way of writing down my thoughts, writing down the responses, writing down my 3 or 4 key arguments before I start doing the writing. So once I think I have a general organic idea about the issue or the question, then I start looking at the literature, what's been written out there already, in order to ensure that I am not coming at it at a vacuum. I know what's out there, and then that helps you to also figure out what hasn't been said about this question. How can I contribute to the body of knowledge by bringing in something that hasn't really been looked at or has been looked at but not looked at deeply enough? So that helps you to then contribute something to the table or bring something to the table. So for my students, I always tell them, come from a place of interest. What is it that drives you? What are you interested in doing now or in the future? Most importantly, what problem are you thinking about solving? And that passion with which you have that question or that passion with which you are interested in an issue can sustain you through the writing process, because writing is not easy. You have to be able to sustain yourself. And so passion and interest are very important. Those who hold you through the very tough times.
So those were Jarpa's ideas and tips that she gives to her students. Do you have some that you recommend to people as a way when you're trying to start answering a question?
What she said really resonates with, how I would approach it, how I also hope that other researchers approach it. When they start looking at something and it seems just absolutely huge, it's quite useful just to see what your additional contribution is, because it just makes it more tractable. Oh, actually, they've already looked this much at it. So therefore, I'm going to see if I can just, contribute in these areas which are unexplored. In terms of the discipline of writing, so I was speaking on a panel with fiction writers, and I am absolutely impressed by how they go about their day. They all have slightly different ways of doing it, but the most important thing is time and routine. So I remember one of them said, I just block out 3 hours in the morning and I'll just sit at my desk and I would just write. Some give themselves like a word limit. They have to write that many words. And they got to me and they said, what's your writing routine? I said, well, I try to fit it around seminars. And I thought, well, that's not a good answer. So I think routine. But to be, but seriously, I also have, time that you just, carve out. Because if you take a meeting in the middle of your writing time, it's not productive.
That's it.
But I'm impressed by the one who said, I'm up at 5 a.m., I have my breakfast, and then I sit at my desk for 3 hours until 10. I thought, wow, that is discipline.
That is discipline. Not many of us can do that. Riccardo and Jarpa also shared some tips with us for things they think we should avoid when entering the prize.
Since the questions are very often open-ended, the temptation is there by someone who says, "Oh, I've been doing that piece of work that I never got around finishing and I never submitted somewhere in the drawer here. Let me take out the modern equivalent of a whiteout. I'll change the title. I put a few sentences here and there to make it fit, and I squeeze it in." It is so apparent, it is so patent when this is done, and none of the adapted submissions, let's call them this way, have gone anywhere. So that is the thing not to do.
We are also looking at the extent to which people are relying on technology to do the writing, ghost writing, using AI tools to do the writing. We can tell, we can pick, and sometimes you can pick no matter how well somebody tries. So be very careful when you're submitting your proposal, because we have hawk eyes. We are watching very closely in terms of every word and how it's formulated.
So, hawk eyes, that's what we have. Now, I mean, over the last 10 years, the prize has encouraged writers to stretch and flex their writing muscles. So we asked the board members why the prize is such a good opportunity for writers interested in creative nonfiction.
If I will come at this question with a confession first, that is that I wish I wasn't on the board, because each time I sit in the room and I think about the questions and I think, Lord, I wish I could have gotten this money to write my 6 or 7 books. Apart from the money, it's also the importance that the foundation has placed on questions and existential questions around the world that they think the world needs to know about, the world needs to be aware of, the world needs to address. And so it's a great thing to have a foundation that is interested in such questions that really push for development, push for change around the world. I commend the work of the Foundation 9 Dots for what it's doing, answering big questions, important questions, and most importantly, contributing to the professional development of people.
All the submissions are anonymous, and they remain anonymous till the very end. After we have made the decision, then we lift the veil of ignorance and we become appraised of who the person was. I am not aware of any other book prize that operates in this manner.
So we heard about holding space for professional development and the unique nature of the prize's anonymity. In terms of why you think the prize is a good opportunity for writers, is there anything else that you could add there?
You're right. I think it is an incredible prize in that it is anonymously judged. So it is, just what you want.
Yes.
Just merit-based competition.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything more to add to what they've said. What you're doing is you're making a contribution to a big debate that will affect society and its future.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the prize money and the support really helps develop that next step for a lot of writers who themselves will go on to shape the battle of ideas, the way that we contribute to public discourse, because not all subjects reward contributions to public discourse. So academia is famously one of them, where a lot of careers don't necessarily bridge into popular book writing, even creative nonfiction.
Yeah.
So I think it is very special in that sense.
Yeah. Well, as we're coming towards the end of the podcast, have you got maybe one tip that you would give to anyone really interested in applying to the prize? What would your sort of key tip for them be?
The only way to not win is to not enter.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm delighted that you'll be back with us for the second episode, all about answers. So we launch our 6th cycle of the prize with a new question on the 9th of October. And then it will be over to the people who are watching and listening. So let's end with one final tip from Riccardo and Jarpa on how to grapple with the 9 Dots Prize question.
Keep it simple. Keep the language honest and genuine and simple. Language is important, but not because we are looking at literary merit, much great if there is, but almost in an Orwellian sense, because it is an indication of intellectual honesty.
So don't be too technical. Write from a place of interest, a place of passion, and also please stay away from AI. It's not going to help you.
Thank you to Loftus Media, who produced this podcast for anyone interested in applying for the 9 Dots Prize or just generally curious about writing non-fiction.